And we're back. Hi, everyone. It's me, Emil Guillermo. This is Emil Amok's Takeout. I know, suddenly it seemed like, isn't he ever going to update those, the thing on the Filipino vets? And, well, look, the best laid plans, right? I mean, I went off to the Baltimore Fringe, did my one-man show, and I'm going to do it again, or a version of it, at the Orlando Fringe coming up in May. But I started doing some other things, and boy, but this week I said I've got to do a podcast because Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, came into California and sued the state over its sanctuary policies. The sanctuary state, sanctuary city policy that really is fueled by 3 state laws to protect immigrant rights, the rights of immigrant workers and immigrant residents here in the state. And when the U.S. government sues the most Asian American state in the nation, well, that's worthy of a podcast. I'm sorry. And of course, one of the state assemblymen who authored one of the 3 laws on, protecting the rights of immigrant workers is San Francisco Assemblyman, or California Assemblyman representing San Francisco, David Chiu. And I said, I got to get David on the phone to explain exactly what this means and what the state is going to do. So I called him today. He was on his way to the airport. And he told me that, hey, bring it on, right? He said it himself on his Facebook page. And David also says that if California loses, you know that ICE is going to get heavy-handed throughout the entire country, and that the battle for how ICE conducts raids here in California really is a battle for how ICE will conduct itself throughout the nation. You know, are they going to be heavy-handed? Are they going to respect the Fourth Amendment rights of individuals here in this country, or are they going to just trample all over them, compromise their rights? I mean, that's what's really at issue here. So we talked to David, who minces no words, calling Trump perhaps the most xenophobic and most racist and most bigoted president in modern history. That's pretty strong. And he goes into what sanctuary is and what it isn't. Because a lot of people would say on the surface, hey, sanctuary sounds like a good idea, right? I mean, don't you want people breaking the law to be brought under the law to face to face a judge, in this case an immigrant judge? Well, criminal law, immigrant law, very different. But so are the enforcement arms. And I think that's one thing that's lost when people talk about sanctuary. They forget that you can't just slap a badge, an ICE badge, on and deputize a member of a local police force or local law enforcement. Because what happens is the immigrant communities, they lash back. They say, well, who are you working for? Are you working for us? Are you working for them? Because if you're working for them, we're not going to report any crimes for fear of deportation, for fear of some kind of immigration action. And we're already seeing that in Los Angeles. So this is one of the important things that, hey, look, ICE, stay in your lane. That's what California is saying. And we'll stay in our lane, because if California's law enforcement officials, if they end up doing the bidding for ICE, it really means that public safety is at risk in California. I mean, that's something that is not often considered when people see, immigration officers and police and ICE coming in. Why can't they help each other? Well, not so fast. I mean, there are ways they can help each other. ICE can come in and have the right paperwork, but I think they're not even willing to do that. I mean, in recent raids, they got about 245 people, many of whom were just living their life and, law-abiding, peaceful citizens. And now this is what happens in a world where Trump's chaos reigns, right? So David Chiu, Assemblyman David Chiu, is on the podcast, and he'll talk about what it means for California to be sued and what California is willing to do to stand up and to protect immigrants' rights, not just in California, but throughout the nation. But it begins here. I mean, Trump let that deadline pass, so we don't even have a conclusion on DACA, and we're going to have to wait for the courts to figure that one out. There's no comprehensive immigration reform. So this is our issue. And so here's California Assemblyman David Chiu talking about what the state is prepared to do to protect the rights of immigrants.
Since his campaign, and certainly after Election Day, Donald Trump and his administration have declared war on our immigrant families and on California. He issued several unconstitutional executive orders. He has proposed the hiring of 10,000 new ICE agents to fan across America and deport immigrants. We're talking about the most xenophobic, racist, anti-immigrant president in modern history. And in California, we believe that we should not be aiding and abetting his out-of-control deportation machine. So last year, we passed a number of laws designed to protect California from what he's trying to do, but all were crafted to be consistent with federal law. And we certainly spent a lot of time with lawyers to make sure that they were absolutely legal and constitutional.
So you did a Facebook post and said, "Bring it on." When you say "bring it on," what does that mean?
Jeff Sessions decided to bring this lawsuit and engage in a publicity stunt by coming into the state capitol and suing all of us. And we're not going to back down. We will defend our laws to the hilt. Our Attorney General is confident, and we will do what we need to do to protect our state. I authored one of the three laws that were sued. The law that I had written, the Immigrant Worker Protection Act, which was passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Brown last year, is simple. It simply it requires the feds and ICE agents to follow the Constitution. Under our Constitution, there is a Fourth Amendment right that all people have against unreasonable searches and seizures. These laws apply to ICE. And it simply says that before ICE raids happen, ICE agents need to provide judicial warrants if they're going to conduct a workplace raid, or a subpoena if they want confidential employee information. And it's that simple.
Has that happened?
Needed, though.
Yeah. Has that happened today?
It actually, in the raids that have happened in recent weeks, we've understood, from what I have understood anecdotally, ICE has been providing the paperwork, but my understanding is they do not want to have to provide any paperwork. Mm. They want to be able to just kick down doors and start arresting people, and we're saying that they need to follow the law. Mm. And so our law is meant to complement the Constitution and already existing federal law and federal regulations that require ICE agents to go through a process before they bang on doors and run in and start arresting people.
Well, let's talk about what's happened, in Oakland and a lot of Northern California in the last couple of weeks when ICE came in. Given this suit, does this embolden them to do more? Are they going to come back? I know they've criticized the mayor of Oakland, Libby Schaaf, for her outspokenness and her trying to protect her constituents. But what happens going forward now with this suit and with any future raids? Will they happen? Does it deter them? What happens?
Well, certainly with the suit, as we've all said in California over the last few days, we'll meet them in the courtroom, and by Bring It On, if Sessions wants to take the fight to us in the courtroom, we will do everything we can to defend our state, defend our laws, and do everything so that our immigrant families are not being ripped apart, our immigrant workers are not being hauled out of our workplaces, and that Donald Trump doesn't get to come to California to try to destroy our economy. And the fact of the matter is that there is so much of our economy that is 1,000% dependent on immigrant labor. And because of the failure of Trump and Sessions and their Republican allies to pass comprehensive immigration reform, 1 out of 2 agriculture workers lacks the documentation that they need to do work, and what Trump is doing could end up having a horrible impact on the nation's agricultural output. 1 out of 3 restaurant workers, 1 out of 5 building trades workers, because of Donald Trump's and his Republican allies' desire to not create a path for legal citizenship in our country. They are trying to damage the California economy, which is the 6th largest economy in the world. And we are saying we're not going to stand for that. We're going to fight him in court. And if he wants to take the fight to us, bring it on.
David, you're there in the Capitol with the other legislators, and does it sometimes feel like the feds, especially President Trump, is targeting California, is really punishing California?
Oh, there's no doubt that they are trying to punish California, that they are selectively pretending to enforce their laws, but using it as a way to harass California, to harass immigrant families, harass immigrant workers, to try to scare people off job sites, and it's very clear this is part of their strategy.
Now, how about this idea that, well, if you're saying bring it on, you're going to meet them in court, this is a legal battle. Doesn't it represent a burden to California to fight this? I mean, a lot of people are concerned about, well, what does this mean in terms of taxpayer support in order to fight this? What kind of burden is it to the state?
It absolutely is a burden. The fact is, we have to spend taxpayer resources to make sure that our family members don't get ripped apart and our economy remains intact. But we need to do what we have to protect our state.
How about as far as Asian Americans go? I mean, I'm doing this for the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund blog site, and what particular threat does this pose to Asian Americans and Asian American families?
Asian American families and Latino families are suffering and are the same receiving end of what Donald Trump is trying to do. We have countless Asian immigrant families who are the ones who are being targeted by what Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions and their ICE agents are trying to do. And this is why, for me, as a son of Chinese immigrants, it's been important for the work that I do that we're doing everything we can to defend our Asian, our Latino, our African, our European immigrants, because our immigrants are the backbone of our communities, and built the success of our cities, our states, our country since the beginning of time. And Donald Trump is engaged in an un-American war, trying to kick out immigrants, and he's forgotten his own roots. His own roots, where he was descended from. He's certainly forgotten the immigrant roots of his first and third wives, and it's a terrible time. But we need to do what we can to defend our people.
All right, just a couple more questions, David. You know, there was a failure on the part of the Congress to move forward, and the part of the president to come to a compromise on protecting the Dreamers. What happens to Dreamers now, and what happens to overall immigration now? Do we have more time because the courts are saying, well, we have to make sure that these suits that are now in the lower courts, get their say? Or how are Dreamers to to react to the inaction of the politicians?
Well, I have been incredibly sympathetic to the plight of dreamers. Many of these are kids who were brought to the United States when they were 2 or 3 years old. They don't know their homeland countries. Many instances, they don't even speak the country that their parents immigrated from. They have been model students. They have been exemplary community leaders, and Donald Trump has decided to target them. Fortunately, the courts have intervened and will not allow that to happen, at least in the intervening months. And my hope is that Congress comes to its senses. Our Democratic members have all stepped up, and some Republicans are starting to understand just how awful it is. The idea of these students potentially being deported would be tragic and completely unfair. So my hope is that cooler heads in Congress will prevail, but we will see. We unfortunately live in a time of a so-called president who is trying to make good on his campaign promise to be the most xenophobic, bigoted, anti-immigrant president in modern history.
Well, tell me, if you were an immigrant right now listening to this, if you were someone who is undocumented, someone who has sort of been under the radar, but now is, because of the chaos that the president is creating, is now exposed and perhaps could be subject to these ICE raids. What is your advice, your message to these people who are now have some reason to be in real fear of ICE agents coming in at any time?
I would say first and foremost that your elected officials in California, we have your back, and we are doing everything we can to stand by you, enact laws to protect you, and ensure that we have the resources to do this. I would also, though, say that it's important for everyone to be watchful, to be ever vigilant, to inform yourselves as to your rights, and if in the chance that somehow you come into contact with ICE, you have the right to remain silent. You should get yourselves educated on your rights, and there is a very robust network of immigration organizations and legal and civil rights organizations that are ready to step up and help you, and you should know who they are. My wife actually works with refugee youth during these very dark times, and there's a very robust network of very capable advocates and attorneys ready to represent, and we will do everything we can to protect our family members. They are our brothers, they are our fathers, they are our grandparents, they are our kids, and we're going to do what we need to do to protect them.
David, just one last question. We've spoken for about 14 minutes here now, and we have not mentioned the key word that is kind of like a trigger word in Trump's mind, in Sessions' mind, and that is the idea of sanctuary. Is sanctuary solid in California and in cities that have adopted sanctuary as a position to protect immigrants?
Well, let me first say I'm proud to represent a sanctuary city. I'm proud to represent a sanctuary state. But sanctuary is a little bit of a misnomer. Let me explain what it is and what it is not. What we're saying when we're saying that our cities and our states are sanctuary jurisdictions are we will not spend state taxpayer or local taxpayer resources in aiding and abetting the out-of-control deportation machine of Donald Trump. So our employees, our law enforcement, our social service workers, our public health workers, our teachers are living in cities and states where we have a law. We have laws that say you cannot cooperate with ICE. So that is what sanctuary means. Now, what sanctuary does not mean is it does not mean that if you're in our city, you cannot be arrested by ICE. ICE can come into any of our cities and conduct their business within the confines of the Constitution and federal law. But it does mean that that in our cities, particularly when it comes to preventing crime, our local police are not allowed to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. And the reason for these policies is it enhances public safety. If our immigrant communities, and in many of our cities, they represent half of our cities, if they believed that our local cops would immediately turn them around and give them over to ICE, we would not have witnesses to crimes. We would not have victims of crimes coming to step up. When Donald Trump was elected in recent months, the statistics in Los Angeles are the number of unreported sexual assaults and rapes and domestic violence cases went up because of a fear that somehow this cooperation would happen. And in our sanctuary cities, the policy is our local law enforcement will not work with ICE agents because it's important for us that they gain the respect and the trust of immigrant communities so that we can fight our local crime. What Donald Trump is suggesting is that he would like to deputize our local police officers, our local sheriffs, and others as the arm of his out-of-control deportation machine. And what that would mean for our public safety would be terrible. So that is what sanctuary means and what sanctuary doesn't mean.
So it really is a matter of what the feds do is a Fed concern, and then the people, the law enforcement effort in the state is its own. It's a very narrow view of this idea, right? Of whose jurisdiction or who has control.
A local police officer did not sign up to be an ICE agent, and those are two very different things. And we need to make sure that our communities are safe while federal immigration laws are being protected. And for 8 years under the Obama administration, we were able to do that. We were able to separate those two items, and that is an important thing. We have immigration laws that are being upheld. We have local criminal laws that need to be upheld, but they are two separate things, and how we get that done is not further when Donald Trump is trying to stick an ICE badge on every local cop.
David, I appreciate your time, and thank you for speaking out for not just Asian American immigrants, but all immigrants and all of California. And I presume that this, California, if Trump is successful in California, it's probably going to spread throughout the country, right? This idea that what Trump can do, what ICE can do, and which means the rights will be compromised throughout the nation.
We know we're not only fighting for Californians, we're fighting for all Americans in every state, because he is trying to breach our rights as Americans, and we know we need to hold the line. Whether you're in New York or Georgia or Iowa or North Dakota, we have rights, and the Constitution applies to Donald Trump and to his ICE agents, and we need to make sure that remains the case.
David, I really appreciate your time. Good luck to you. Thank you for talking to us here.
I appreciate that, Emil. Thank you for your interest in this.
That's California Assemblyman David Chiu on what California is going to do to protect the rights of immigrants in the face of this lawsuit against them that's waged by the feds. California's not backing down. You got to root for California. And as I said earlier, hey, ICE has got to stay in its lane, and the local law enforcement folks in California are going to stay in their lanes. And that's the way things have to be. But we'll see. But it's encouraging to hear Assemblyman Chiu say that his words for immigrants is that California has your back. They're not going to let you down. The state officials, the politicians of the state, unlike the politicians nationwide who failed to act by that March 5th DACA deadline that's imposed by Trump. But fortunately, the court said, hey, we're going to hear the suits first. We're going to hear all the suits about the Dreamers and DACA. So the immigration issue, far from over. Don't don't be distracted by all the other things that the Trump administration wants to put out there, from Stormy Daniels to Kim Jong Un to tariffs to you name it. Russian investigation, well, he wants that to go away. But there's so much. Can't be distracted. Keep your eyes on the prize, as they say. I mean, the big issue for Asian Americans remains immigration, DACA, especially when they talk about chain migration, ending chain migration, which is in itself a kind of a racist notion, chain migration, or chain immigration. That's what the 1965 Immigration Act was based on. Family unity. And that's one thing that I heard from David Chiu. We're not going to let the feds break up our families. Anyway, thank you for joining us again on this. I guess it's kind of a special edition of Emil Amok's Takeout. We're back. I mean, as warranted. We'll put these up. Check us out at www.aldef.org/blog. Contact us through there. And we'll be back again next time for more on Emil Amok's Takeout.